Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Conard, City Manager, and I'm happy to welcome you all to the first meeting of the, our first order of business will be to rename ourselves. That's way too long a title. I keep referring to this as the COVID Recovery Task Force, and I'm hopeful that we could maybe shorten it to something like that. But that being said, thank you all for joining. I speak for Councilor Bagley, who we'll hear from in a moment, about the importance of your participation and how we stand up this task force. So the first order of business would be to go around and explain, share your name, what organization you're with, and I think we'll leave it at that for now. But I'm Karen Conard. I'm here to represent the City of Portsmouth. I will be joined by other city staff as may be appropriate, including the health officer, Kim McNamara.
Hey everyone, Kathy Beebe. I'm the Executive Director at Haven Violence Prevention and Support Services.
Oh, let me mention, sorry Kathy, that when you speak, move the microphone as close to you as possible. It's really hard to hear for recording purposes. So,
Do you want to hear who I am again?
Yes, thank you.
I'm Kathy Beebe. I'm the Executive Director of Haven Violence Prevention and Support Services.
I'm Lori Waltz. I am the Executive Director of Leadership Seacoast.
Janet Lotch, CEO for Greater Seacoast Community Health.
Mm-hmm.
Linda Bralette, CEO of my home address, 260 Thornton Street, retired Portsmouth teacher.
There you go.
Will Arvels, Executive Director of Crossroads House.
Hi, I'm Amber Buttermore, Portsmouth citizen and fundraising chair for Dondero PTA.
Hi, I'm Molly Wilson. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist and a business owner in town.
Hi, everybody. I'm Whitney Brown. I'm the manager of Safe Harbor Recovery Center of Granite Pathways.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Bagley. I'm a city councilor.
I would share that we have other members of the committee that weren't able to make this meeting, and if it makes sense for those following along, I'm happy to read those names off. We have Andrea Ardito, Abby Frank, Tanya Marino, Lori McIntosh, Mimi Wheeler, and Nancy Brown. And I think that's it in terms of who's here and who isn't here. I should mention that as city manager, I'm in an ex officio capacity. I don't vote, and you all will serve as the primary opinion policy makers, and I'm happy to be the resource. So, and because I can't vote, I cannot serve as an officer. So I said I would take a crack at looking for a nomination of officers. It would be ideal to have a chairman of this task force or co-chairs if that feels less onerous. We will definitely need someone to take minutes, and we can talk about what that feels like and how minimalistic the minutes can be. And so I'll open it up to this group to have that conversation about who's going to lead this group.
Weren't there a couple of names that had already been thrown about, or had folks that had stepped up and volunteered, or
There were
at least to you?
yes, there were a couple that were brought up to me, and I will be happy to share them now, or happy to hear what people have to say. That sounded a lot more cryptic than it needed to.
I know I mentioned I'm happy to co-chair, but I would love to have it be a co-chair versus chair.
We have a brave soul who is willing to co-chair.
As long as I don't take the minutes.
Yeah.
That's not a bad call.
That's a really good call.
And I believe I had also mentioned to you that I'd be willing to co-chair because I knew you were being willing to step up and co-chair, so I'd be happy to do it with you if everybody agrees to that.
I think this is Nancy Brown. Nancy, is that you? Are you Nancy? You are. Hop on up. So it sounds like we have two willing people to serve as co-chairs. Could one of you voting members of the task force make that motion, and could someone else second it, unless there are other nominations we'd like to hear from? Are people comfortable with that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, so one of you wonderful people need, and Andrew and I don't count as voting members. It would be great if one person could make that motion and if another person could second that motion.
I'll motion that Kathy Beebe and Will Arvello are co-chairs of this soon-to-be renamed committee.
I second.
Who seconded that?
Janet.
Thank you, Janet. Okay, great. And I'm happy to take minutes just for this one meeting, since I'm
Thank you.
doing all the talking so far. All right, so we have a motion.
Oh, sorry, you were going to say that.
We have a motion and a second. And are people comfortable voting on the co-chairs? And if so, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now the tough vote. Who wants to be the bare bones minute taker? Because as a public body, and I'll share with you in a second, and I'll share with you now, that we've put forth a right to know document which explains how public bodies need to hold meetings. We need to be open to the public. We need to be able to be accessible, and we've made great strides to make meetings accessible to folks virtually and remotely, and we need to keep minutes that will be kept on the city's website. So,
In terms of who takes the minutes, how does so there's somebody at the city that will help them, I mean, how do the minutes get to be online and so on and so forth?
right, so if one of you wonderful people are willing to take some minutes, and you send them to my assistant Jessica, who was the person who set this up, she will share them with the production team and the back of house, so we will get them on the website.
I'm okay to take minutes.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Janet.
So could someone kindly make a motion to nominate Janet for secretary?
I'll make a motion to nominate Janet Latch for secretary.
Second.
Will and, okay. Any other nominations, any discussion on that? Before she changes her mind, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. I think those are all the officers we need at this time. I think if this group decides that other officers are needed, we can take that up. So now at this moment, it would be best to hear from Councillor Andrew Bagley, who brought this item forth initially. So floor is yours, Councillor.
Thank you, City Manager. First, I'll say all these meetings are recorded and they'll be posted on our YouTube channel. So with the minute taking, it's good to have like an outline, but you don't have to get too detailed because you can always refer to the video, provided there aren't any technical difficulties. So I'll start by reading off the charge. The COVID Response Task Force Blue Ribbon Committee, is a mouthful, is for 6 months to evaluate the challenges and identify low-cost, high-impact recovery solutions that use ARPA monies. The CRTF will be composed of citizens of Portsmouth, local nonprofit representatives, and the city manager as an ex officio member who can incorporate city staff and resources. The initial objective of the CRTF will be to meet, discuss, and survey the needs of the community and incorporate their findings into a recovery plan. The CRTF will be fashioned that input from residents is well-defined and simple to do with public meetings at various locations and times throughout the city. There would also be a dedicated webpage on the city site that outlines the proceedings and as a contact button for residents to make recommendations and suggestions. The CRTF will allow the city of Portsmouth to build a strong, resilient, and equitable recovery by making investments that support long-term growth and opportunity. First, I want to thank you all for giving up your valuable time and being willing to serve. The idea for this committee came to me through several residents that were concerned about particularly the youth or less advantaged people getting left behind because of COVID. So the best description of COVID and how it affects people that I've heard is that we were all in the same storm together, but we were all on different boats, and some of us weren't on boats, we just had a life vest, and some of us were treading water, I think is the best way to describe it. So the idea for this committee is to take residents with backgrounds that are particularly well suited, such as Linda Brillette, who used to be an elementary school teacher here in town, as well as leaders from local nonprofits that work with those communities and have firsthand knowledge. My hope for this community, or for this committee, is that by working together, you guys can identify solutions to problems that are low cost and have a high impact. And I know Abby Frank isn't here today, but one of the, this happened pre-COVID, but one of the things that I saw as a great solution is at Little Harbor School on Fridays, they have something called Sunrise Squad. And it's a group of K through 5th grade students who gather in the cafeteria in the morning, have breakfast, and that was always happening. But what they incorporated was one Friday a month the fire department comes in and provides some local leadership role models. One Friday a month, I believe, the library comes in. And then they also have rotating guest visits. So those 4 Fridays a month, they're given a chance for these children, for whatever reason, have been nominated to be part of this group, interaction with adults in the community that they might not otherwise have. So it's not a very expensive thing to do. I mean, the fire department, they show up in their ambulance and their fire truck, and if there's a fire call, they obviously leave and go to the fire call. But it's otherwise a sunk cost because we're already paying the fire department their salaries to be there. So we're really maximizing the impact without much cost. So some of the things I thought of, I know we're fairly well through the summer, but summer camps and summer activities are difficult for some members of our community because of transportation, because of cost, because of food scarcity, things like that. So one stat that I heard was that band enrollment in the schools is down by 50% since COVID. So that was an opportunity for students to gather in a gather together, do an activity that's outside of the standard required things, but because of COVID and because of the challenges of COVID, things like that have dropped off considerably. And I don't know the stats, but if you looked, I would imagine that families that are struggling more than others are probably less likely to participate in these types of things. And the barriers to those that I hear over and over again are things like transportation and childcare. So I think that the task of this group is to look at the population as a whole, but it should be cognizant of the fact that the younger you are, the more likely this has disproportionately affected you. The other thing that is important to be aware of is, for instance, our kindergartners and first graders, the vast majority of their life has been during COVID. So they're coming to school without having had the social interactions and activities that previous generations have had. So I would encourage the committee to look at the city as a whole, but I would focus on how we can best help our youth. And the charge is, you are all the people with the expertise. I am not. So the charge is, this is the goal, but how we best get there, I think, is something that this committee is going to be able to develop. And as you guys have some meetings, find your footing and where's the best places to implement resources.
One thing I would add to that is I believe the vote of the council reflected that this group would work for 6 months or until the end of the calendar year and provide a report
Yes.
at the end of this calendar year as to progress made and recommendations, if any, or a plan to map out how to best move forward.
And it's my understanding that the task force can either end there or maybe move forward into the new year, possibly, if the council thinks it's appropriate?
Yeah,
More time?
I think we didn't want to put up too many restrictions, but we also wanted to put an end date on it so that we had a target to work towards. And then when we get the synopsis of this, this may be a committee that continues in some form or shape. Maybe it's altered or maybe it doesn't. Maybe we've accomplished all our goals. But I think long-term COVID's going to be with us and we're going to require solutions for the long term. And I hope that there's some synergies that are created here by bringing people that are all working together with to make our community better, but maybe have been working a little bit in silos because they're unaware of what other groups and organizations are doing. So maybe by combining some resources, we can effectively get more done. But it's really going to be up to you guys over the next 6 months to chart a course and then come to the council with your asks and what you think we can do to make the community better.
But
Sorry. And do we have to have measures for any activity that we create or?
meaning measures for success or
Yeah.
metrics, anything, I think that's for the group to determine. It's really open-ended, and I would add that by virtue of forming this as a blue ribbon committee, it has the ability legislatively to operate until the end of this council's term, which would be December of 2023. So I think we should look at December as a good check-in, status report. Do we want to stay together? Do we want to keep working together? Does it make sense? We can take that evaluation at that point. But each time the council turns over every 2 years, they have an ability to stand up new blue ribbon committees renew existing ones or sunset those that don't seem to have a purpose anymore. So that's the only reason I think blue ribbon committee is on the letterhead.
Yes.
It'll be my 3 favorite words to temporarily remove, so we don't get, so long-winded. But
Question, what was your initial question that she was responding
Whether or not
to?
we have to have measures for any activity or program that we develop?
or make recommendations for. That's another good point, that this is an advisory body to the council. So what this group will do is make recommendations that the council will then act on as the policy creators for the city.
Karen, and Andrew, can I ask a question about, because you mentioned it several times, and that is about the future. So this could end at the end of the year or possibly could continue, at least through the end of this council's term. And this is just the way I think, because I think about, I don't think short term, I think long term. Would it be useful, and I don't know if this exists currently, so that's why I'm asking the question, is there a task force or a committee that is thinking about the next 10, 20 years for Portsmouth in terms of what Portsmouth may look like? How do we continue to prepare for change over time and so forth? And I'm just thinking, for example, just one example is obviously the housing issue, workforce, demographic shifts, and so forth. So is there any benefit for this body to be thinking not just near term, but also longer term in terms of what, and I know we're celebrating Portsmouth 400, so again, for me, it's what does Portsmouth look like in the next 10 years, and how do we prepare ourselves to make sure that we're all doing the right things to make Portsmouth a balanced, healthy community. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but I think right now, at least in my estimation, Portsmouth does not serve all of its residents equally or equitably. And so that's a big concern of mine, but not just Portsmouth, I'm talking all of New Hampshire.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say that the charge for this, and that's a great question, and we do look at that with different groups and committees.
Okay.
The initial charge for this committee is the short term, in the sense that, COVID just happened, and how do we quickly right the ship? I mean, obviously things have been done, and how do we continue to do those things? Now, there may be some long-term plans that grow out of this, but I think the acute needs and the immediate needs are primarily the focus.
If I can add to that, the city stands up a 10-year master plan process, and we last did that in 2015, so we are looking for a new one to start in 2025, which really means late 2023, all of 2024, we are working toward that next 10-year master plan. So I would see that the work that this group does helps inform and perhaps could live on in some capacity toward that conversation.
Thank you.
Sure. And maybe that, but I don't mean to keep running this meeting. You guys want to take over? I can stop at any time. Maybe that's a nice segue, unless people have questions about where we are so far, into the ARPA funding and the status of where that is. So the city is the recipient of $12.88 million, and Councilor, jump in at any time. We have utilized 57.5% of that $12.88 million to date, leaving 42.5% or $5.4 million in round numbers. So much of the funding was used to address shortfalls in the budget, given changes in inflation and changes that we've all seen. So it was used in a manner consistent with why we got the ARPA money in the first place, to offset the effects of COVID, so as not to adversely impact taxpayers when it came to budget time, which was a way to equitably distribute the funds, if you will. The challenge and the opportunity really is for the council is to decide how best to utilize and spend the rest of that money. In terms of mechanics, we have until December 31st of 2024 to obligate all of the money, and December 31st, 2026 to expend all of the money. So I'll speak for the council, and then I'll stop talking and let him speak for himself, to say the council is looking for guidance on how best to handle the remaining distribution, and who should be the beneficiaries. How is that best and most equitably distributed? Should a portion of it go toward next year's budget? Should a portion of it be reserved for the FY25 budget? Should some of it go to some short-term needs that are identified in part by folks like yourselves? So,
Yeah, and I guess I would further point out that, we did get this money, but we're not grasping at a place where to spend it. There's a lot of projects within the city that could qualify for this money, because I think we've had the final rules. What we're trying to do is making sure that we spend it in a way that we get the most benefit for the community out of this money. So there's going to be a lot of competition for these monies from various groups throughout the city. What we want to identify as a council is, where do we get the most impact? Where do we make the most benefit for the community in the spirit of why the money was awarded to the city by the federal government? So what we're looking to do is really maximize the value of this dollar. So we don't want to spend it in a way just because it technically qualifies. We want to spend it in a way that is most beneficial to the citizens of Portsmouth.
So a question on that. So the $5.4 million, is that going to remain static for now, meaning that any portion of those $5.4 million will not be spent down, so that we're making decisions on $5.4 million, not $4 million, or, in the next few months or anything like that? You
that's a good question.
That's a good question. I would, since there's so many asks of this 5.4 million, I wouldn't hazard a guess at the number, but I would say it's considerably smaller than that 5.4 million.
Okay.
That would probably be at the disposal of this committee. So it's really going to come down to the ideas you come up with, and how much they cost, and how much support there is on the council to commit to those ideas.
So we're kind of in a race against time.
Yes and no. I think this council really wants to be thoughtful with how it doles out the rest of the money.
Yeah, I was joking, actually.
If you were in my seat, you'd have a folder this thick from different departments' requests for ARPA, so we could have spent the money 17 times over. We have heard from the Arts and Nonprofit Blue Ribbon Committee that they have requested as much as 4% of the total amount, which is about $480,000, to go toward financial support for the arts and nonprofit community. So that ask is sort of out there in the Ethernet on the table. What I think this group is charged with doing is understanding the asks that haven't come forward yet, or how to best synthesize them. And maybe this group individually could do great things, but when you're all together in one room, perhaps we can learn that people are trying to best utilize the money so it's most efficient. There could be ways that you all are working independently of one another that may benefit from a conversation about money on the table, and how do things go about being delivered. Is it existing services? Is it services that we've yet to identify? Things like that.
So when we're looking at recommendations, though, we really should be looking at the costs associated with all of whatever those would be.
I think to the extent practical, yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't get hung up on it, but it would certainly help inform the conversation.
I guess the best way to say it is that there's going to be plenty of competing interests for this money, so the best ideas will rise to the top. One area that it may be best served by this committee is kind of the issue of the commons, where you have the town green, and it's to everybody's benefit to not, have their animals graze on there too much so that they get used up. However, it's to the individual's benefit that their animals graze as much as possible in there. So if this committee identified gaps in the support services that maybe no organization really wants to take on, but all organizations would benefit from, I think that might be an instance where this committee makes a lot of sense and could have a big impact. I don't have a specific example of that, but say for instance a transportation component, of getting from a house to a nonprofit to another nonprofit and back to that house. Whose job is that? Who could best fill that need? Things along those lines.
Can I make an ask that the committee be kept informed of, if, for example, if the 5.4 million amount gets spent to some degree, that we are informed of what that amount is, so that when we're having public hearings, we're not speaking about 5.4 million, we're actually speaking about what the actual amount is. Because I can see some frustration happening with people coming forward with ideas, and if the resources continue to diminish over time, then, you know, what's the exercise? I mean, we'll get a lot of good stuff out of it, but I can see some kind of questions or frustrations coming forth on that.
I will take that as my charge on a regular basis every time we meet to update the group.
Right.
But we cannot spend any ARPA money, we, the city, without getting approval from council. So it will be in a public process, but I wouldn't expect all of you to follow council meetings if you don't wish to or normally do. So that would be on my plate on every agenda. I'll make sure that this group knows if anything changes. I think at this point, I don't anticipate anything changing. In addition to budget offsets and certain things directly related to COVID, the one thing that we did ask for and that we should talk about at a future meeting when it's appropriate to do so is that Kim McNamara, our health officer, and if you haven't, I would think everybody at this table must have either met her or knows of Kim. She is looking to update the city's community health public, well, we're doing a health assessment. It's updating our community health, public health profile. And a lot of the information that's going to come from that will be really useful to not only this group, but, you know, city administration and how we plan moving forward, the council. So that was $65,000 out of the $12.88 million that Kim lobbied for successfully. I believe it was May. So she is working to get that pulled together right now.
Great.
So that will be a good infusion of information to this group for sure.
And one of the things I'll say about the community health assessment, why it was such a good ask and something to keep in mind, is a lot of nonprofits use the community health assessment to then write for grants. So this is an amount of money that we spent, but then we get a much bigger return on the money because of what it can lead to and help to. So anytime we can do that where we leverage resources to then gain more resources, that's always ideal.
I have a couple of questions. One of them will primarily address, I think it will be helpful for this group, and if we need to find the information, that's fine, and if it can be shared with us, that's even better. But to understand what asks are in the pipeline for the money, in case there's any opportunity for us to collaborate and include those already percolating ideas and requests. Second question is, what are the technical requirements of how the money can be spent or cannot be spent, and how can we obtain that information? And the third question that I had has escaped my mind. So I'm sure another smart person here is going to ask it.
Don't you think that's a part of what came with the money? Some restrictions or comments on how the money should be used?
It did, and Jane Farini is one of our city attorneys, and she is our in-house rule. She's the one who makes sure we follow all the rules related to the final rule of ARPA, which is this 400-page document. So I'm thinking future agendas could include an update from Jane on what we should and shouldn't be thinking about, in addition to Kim coming forth with the status of the health assessment. So maybe at the next meeting we get Jane in here.
Yeah.
Would you be able to come to a meeting sometime and talk to us?
Right. I think it would be appropriate to be at the next meeting. I'll leave that up to the co-chairs who will work to develop agendas, but right. But this is perfect. This is exactly where this group needs to go. You asked the question, because we live this, and it's hard to get, you don't want to get in my head, but it would be good to understand what you guys need for baseline information to then start moving forward.
So related to baseline information, I'm thinking that certainly for me, I'll speak for myself, I need to understand from a demographer or an economic development person, our city, you mentioned Kim McNamara, so anything related to what are the issues that Portsmouth is dealing around health and continuum of care, and what are we, in terms of economic development, where are the gaps in terms of demography, what does the population look like, and where are the underserved communities, where they exist, what are they not getting, those kinds of things. And I mean, for me, I need to kind of that's the puzzle, understanding what the puzzle looks like, or the different pieces of the puzzle look like, so that we can make informed decisions.
But did I understand from what you said that we really should be focusing on youth?
I would say it's focusing on needs of the community, but with an emphasis on youth, because I think they've been most disproportionately affected. But that may be youth in single-parent households, and how do we make single-parent households more robust? So I don't want to say it's just youth. And to the demographics, we could have someone from the EDC come in, but I think it might be valuable for this committee, since you guys are aware of lots of areas where there's needs, to maybe do a survey of where you think the most needs are. And then you have a framework from each person's perspective of where you think maybe the top 3 or the top 5 things that could be done. And then by doing I think we can set up surveys fairly easily.
Yep, we can.
Maybe by doing a couple surveys during the first few meetings, because the city may not have that information. We'll have some of it, but we may not have as up-to-date boots on the ground information as you folks may have.
So surveys of the general population, you mean?
Right, or where you see the things are falling through.
Yeah, and as we're working to get the public health assessment data that will speak to the demographics and what we're seeing now, it would be great to mine the talent and the information and the base of knowledge you all have in the room. That's exactly why you're here. So we've got to make sure that every meeting provides ample time as a forum for sharing and building.
Can I just, oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead.
So I love this idea about defining restrictions around the spending, having Jean in next meeting. I would love us to develop an actual objective so we know when we stray from it, and objective measures so we know when we've hit the mark at the beginning, probably. Or so I know when I'm talking
Right.
out of turn and stuff. And also, as for the 480,000 that the arts and nonprofit, is that already dedicated, and is that part of the 42% that hasn't been, or is that the 57% that has been dedicated?
It's on the table for discussion. It has not been approved by anybody, but it would, if it were funded, it would come out of the remaining balance.
All right.
And it's an ask on the table right now.
Okay. Yeah.
That was my other question. Thank you.
Yeah.
But now I have another question, or a comment maybe more so. I think mental health needs are really, really important to be addressed. And I don't know if there's another group currently working with the city on that, and if that would fit into sort of our objective. But I would also say that that probably doesn't have age restrictions around it. But there's just been so much happening lately, and I think that this could be a good opportunity.
I think that's an excellent point. So this committee would be the committee to address mental health needs, housing needs, food security needs, all of those types of needs. And that's why I think maybe a survey is such a good idea, because maybe there's 1 or 2 needs that
Really
rise to the top, and then we need to find solutions for.
Has anyone used the Wisdom portal, Department of Health and Human? Would we find that data there? A lot of the data.
Some of it. There's also the scoring, county scoring. There's just a lot of data out there.
Yeah.
We just did a needs assessment for Stratford and Rockingham County in November. So I'll go back and look at that and see what our references were.
Oh, great. Thank you.
What kind of information will you get from the community health assessment, and when will it be done?
That would be an excellent question for Kim.
Okay.
And it really updates the health of the city, but it will also update demographics. So I could share with you demographics that come from our economic development department, but I think for the purpose of this conversation, Kim's numbers will be better. So so I don't misspeak and don't misrepresent, I think Kim and Jane should probably be on our next agenda, and she can speak to all of that.
Great.
And I think the hope is to have some preliminary data to share in the early fall. So we're in the sweet spot of information gathering.
Was there recently a community health assessment?
It's been years. It's been,
I was going to say, it's quite a while, right?
I'll say a decade, but it could even be longer.
So I just want to throw this out from, I'm a retired teacher, but I've worked in a number of different schools, and there are really different schools in our community. I volunteered at New Franklin the last 5 months, and I knew out of some of the other schools that that's a school that struggles a lot. There's many students there that are really not doing well. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but it was quite an experience being there, helping out, you know, and working with little kids that were just totally frustrated. And then I got their stories from the teachers of like even a little bit of their family background. And I think that's, to me, very critical, you know.
I think a key component that's missing in this group is a school department representative. So if it were the will of the group, I could reach out to the new superintendent and ask if he would identify someone. But Andrew, did you have a thought?
No, but I guess my thought would be that's exactly why we've assembled this group. Is so on the city council, we have a number of parents, but I don't believe we have any school teachers. And in our day-to-day lives, we don't necessarily see where the gaps are in coverage. So that's why we've assembled this team together, so that you guys can tell us where are the things that the community can be doing better, how and why. So that's very valuable insight.
I'll share some stories later.
I'm also a former teacher. I was a fourth grade teacher for 11 years in Hampton. And that's my question was, how could we survey the schools or get the schools involved, whether it's the needs from the administrators or the teachers? Because I they do see the unseen, things that you're bringing up, Andrew. So I think it's important to get them involved, whether we survey them or we have a representative.
I think if Abby Frank were here, she could speak directly to, I believe, the
You're right.
structure of her program.
You're right. We have Abby.
You have Abby, but I think the structure of her program is changing for this year, because I think they're building it into a before school. When all the kids are there at 8 o'clock, I think that it's going to be more than one day a week, because those kids have been, their behaviors, their need to be with other people, the socialization, all of that stuff has fallen through the wayside. Like I'm sure a lot of us have fallen by the wayside over this past couple of years. So I think that it'd be critical if Abby was here, she could speak to it, but I also think it's important to get somebody from the school department. I don't know that the superintendent has been here longer than New York Minute, but he might be able to suggest somebody to come.
Yep.
I know the principals, maybe one of them would volunteer to step up.
Who is Abby Frank again?
She
Abby is a
speaks
teacher at
pathology,
Little
Harbor.
To the
Little
teacher.
Harbor.
Yeah.
Do you think it might be a good idea to have someone who's more in that social and emotional learning space, like not a
Like a guidance
history
counselor?
teacher, like a guidance counselor, someone who, like, this is their full-time gig?
Yeah.
There's also Seacoast Mental Health that
Yeah.
goes into Little
They
Harbor.
do.
And then they
They
also
do.
are at Seacoast Mental Health.
Yeah. Do they
I
access
think
the other
Seacoast Mental
buildings
Health would be a
too?
great ad.
Yeah. What was
Do
that?
they access the other buildings as well?
I don't know if they go to Dondero,
Yeah, that's another.
but I think that would be a good. I think I know one of them. What's her name? Laura. She works. She is both the Seacoast Mental Health counselor and the works with the guidance counselor. So it might be
You could ask.
hits all areas.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning, because we have a number of schools here.
Yeah.
And that's one thing this committee can help do is, so we have 3 elementary schools, and Abby Frank created the Sunrise Squad at Little Harbor, and then of course the pandemic hit, so there wasn't a chance to duplicate it at the other 2 elementary schools. And there may be things happening at Dondero and New Franklin that we could also duplicate at the other 2 schools. So because everybody was just sort of treading water during COVID and trying to get through the day, there wasn't a chance to take a 30,000-foot view of things and see what we could be replicating elsewhere. So I think that's something this committee can, that view from 30,000 feet would be a good one for you all to take, I think.
I love the idea, though, for Mr. Arvello of being able to braid it with longer term views so that we don't spend it similarly to maybe Dover, where they put people in short-term housing, and all that money's gone, and everybody's still homeless and houseless. So there might be ways to really have high impact, but with the long view, so we don't harm.
I've just been sitting here thinking about Andrew's comments earlier about focusing on children. I'm not opposed to that, but I'm wondering if my original understanding was that we would take into account potentially all of the needs of the community. And if the charge is from the very beginning that we focus on children in need, then the committee is in a sense, very focused. So I just want to understand, because I'm hearing different things. I just want to understand if the focus is, a very focused charge for us to just, okay, in terms of young children, what are their needs in the Portsmouth community, or whether we're thinking more broadly for other populations. So that I'm getting some mixed messages there, and I want to be clear.
Yeah, so that's a good question. My intent was, maybe if you think about percentages, 60% is focusing on children and families with small children. But it's important that we don't ignore populations such as those living in senior housing, or people who don't have, let's say a robust social circle for whatever reason. So I don't think we should be exclusively focusing on children. I just think that should be a highlight, let's say, of the committee. But I think it's equally important. There's a number of people that live in the senior housing here in town that haven't had the social interaction for the last few years. So maybe having somebody from the senior center come to one of these meetings and talking about some of the needs there, or some of the outreach that could be done there, would be a good thing. So I don't want to limit it to children or to seniors. It should be the whole community. I just wanted to highlight the fact that I think the kids should be a focus.
If I can throw out for consideration of the group and for whatever it's worth, the previous task forces organically found ways to have breakout groups or subcommittees that tackle different components of the larger issue. When we first met 2 years ago, the Citizen Response Task Force organically decided to talk about health, the use of the public realm, and why am I forgetting the third one? There was definitely outdoor dining. What was it? And pop-up, right? That's exactly right. So it could very well be that this group decides one emphasis and one set of folks is going to work on youth. Mental health could be its own subcommittee. So I think that's up for the group to figure out and how to best break it down. Because what I should mention is these meetings were meant to be an hour, give or take, and there's only so much real productive work you can do in an hour. It may make sense to have subcommittees break off, do some work, and come back and report. But again, that's for this group to decide.
Good point.
Well, and I think what I heard you say too is what we're really looking at is what are those lower cost things that have the most impact. So if we're tackling mental health, it might be that we're focusing on children because there's an opportunity there among the schools or something like that, but we're not specifically focusing on any population.
So I would say that next on the agenda is meeting cadence. So that will be up to you guys to decide how often you think you should meet and when. And then something that's not on the agenda, but we'd like to have at all meetings here in the city is public comment. So usually we reserve at the end of the meeting a few minutes for members of the public to speak. And because we're talking about spending ARPA monies, I think the public comment's a more important for this group than maybe some others.
So what makes sense to you all? What feels comfortable as a meeting cadence? And again, there are 14 current members of the committee, and to be able to meet, we have to have 8 of you in person. That doesn't mean other folks couldn't join via Zoom if they needed to, but 8 have to physically be present. It doesn't have to be here. We volunteered to have it here because it's easy to produce, and I think it would make most sense, but
It's comfortable, it's air conditioned.
good. Good. So someone be brave, take a stab. How often do you want to meet?
I think we don't have a lot of time to kind of tackle all this work. So, I mean, at minimum, I think we have to meet bi-monthly, twice a month, because it's going to require some subcommittee work. We're going to do the public hearings, and all of that has to be scheduled. And we have, what, August, 5 months? Pretty much.
And again, that's for a check-in. Don't.
For a check-in.
Yep. Yep.
Not a lot of time. So that's my 2 cents.
For me, I think it depends on how many subcommittees we have. And so if we have more subcommittees, can we minimize this group meeting to once a month
Right.
or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But I also wonder about the information gathering and what that's going to entail in terms of meetings. And, we're already talking about Jane and Kim coming to the next meeting, and there's lots of other ideas we need to decide on in terms of how we're going to get some of that other information.
So just to address Janet's point and your point, is if we initially meet on a regular basis, at least in the beginning, to get set up and maybe form some subcommittees and then decide, okay, we've got some subcommittees doing work, and maybe we can go to a monthly schedule of meetings. But I think it would be prudent for us to at least begin to meet fairly regularly in the first few meetings anyways.
I like that idea. It sounds like we really want to make an impact. I think that's what I'm hearing, and we have a chance to do that in a way that makes sense and is non-duplicative and low cost.
So we have the ability to meet when City Hall is open by and large. If this group prefers a before work or after work meeting, we can certainly do that. I don't want you to feel limited to a time of day. We picked this just because it was a doodle poll results for most people, so.
I personally don't meet, doesn't matter if it's lunchtime or before work. After work gets hard because it gets pretty late.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't mind giving up my lunch hour. I mean,
You can eat it before you come.
eat before I come, eat it, bring it.
You could bring
here,
it.
Share it with you.
Brown bag is totally fine by us if you all decide this could be a brown bag
I had
opportunity.
a half sandwich.
I wonder if Panera would, or something, would donate for our lunch. I might make a call.
Who's our development person?
So does a standing lunch meeting work?
Works for me, for the most part.
Sure.
I would prefer a standing, just to get it on the calendar so that
Yeah.
we can plan for it. And I like the idea of planning maybe at least August for 2 meetings so that we can get the information gathering. Perhaps that goes into September, and then we can ease up on the big group meetings and dive more into our breakout groups.
Yeah.
So that would mean the
So this
9th
was,
and the 23rd.
so are we sticking to Tuesday? I know this was the result of various dates on a doodle poll.
Works for me.
Works for me, too.
I am not here the 9th, but that doesn't mean the whole group can't meet.
Can
All
I
right.
ask a logistical question? Like, who will be in charge of doing the coordinating, like the sending out of the doodle polls or scheduling? And
That would be Jessica Griffin in my office. So
Okay.
you should have received the agenda and the meeting invite from Jessica, so.
so she'll continue?
Yep, she'll do that. And so, did I hear August 9th and 23rd? Do you want me to, what we'll do is make sure we have a quorum for those dates first. So we'll go out to not only you all, but the folks who are not able to make this meeting.
Okay. Wow.
So do we know out of the folks that are here who can be at the 9th and the 23rd?
I can be here.
Me, too.
I think Lori's,
I'm the only one that can't be here on the 9th.
On the 9th.
Tuesdays?
Okay.
That's what it sounds like.
okay.
I could come squealing in. It's a possibility, but I'll be on my way back from the Cape.
No squealing.
Yes, no.
All right, so we'll move forward with that, and what we'll do is confirm that those work. I think, Council, your suggestion was a great one, and perhaps if this group is amenable to that, we'll add public comment in before we adjourn today. Do we have any folks from the public who wish to bring comment forward? Come on up, grab a microphone.
Peter Huda, 280 South Street. In listening to the discussion here today, I noticed it kind of went towards the schools more. I would ask if the city manager would be able to discuss the ARPA funds that are coming into the schools.
Oh, good question.
And there is,
What did you call them?
there is ARPA funds that are coming into the school. If I recall, maybe 3 million or so, maybe 2 tranches.
Yep.
I guess I would ask, since you kind of gravitated to subcommittees, I think that's a great idea, and that you could advise the school department also, along with the city council, especially if that's your, if you're looking at 60% here. The monies are available. They probably, who knows if they thought of the things that you were going to think of here, but that would be also an opportunity to give advice where it looks like you really, really want it. The only other comments I have is I think you're going in a great direction, and this would be definitely a fantastic advisory committee with all of the different views that you have here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just make a comment. The school monies are called ESSER funds, if
ESSER.
I'm not mistaken.
ESSER.
So they're the same as ARPA funds. They just have a different name and structure
Is
to
that an
them.
acronym?
It is elementary and secondary. Now you lost me, but it's ESSER.
ESLR?
ESSER. And what in the interest of time, I'll ask Jane to bring something from Nathan Lunny, who's the school's business administrator, that speaks to the school's the ESSER funds. Former Councilor Huda is right. It was initially in the magnitude of 3.9 million total, and I don't know the status of what they've committed or what they've spent, but we can bring that forward as well.
That's great.
That's
Yeah,
for
just to.
Portsmouth? Excuse me.
That's correct. And it's for SAU 52.
Okay.
Hold on.
I think it's just Portsmouth.
It is just Portsmouth, but don't forget the high school does serve. 40% of the high school is the other 4 towns, interestingly.
40%?
40%, Newington, Newcastle, Greenland, and Rye make up 40% of the high school.
Yeah, I hate to duplicate efforts and love to collaborate where we can to make it efficient.
Another ask, can we have table,
I was going to say that too.
Sure, nameplates.
Yes.
Happy to make those. It would not only help one another, but it would help the folks watching. Sure,
thank you.
we can do that.
Are we adjourning?
I missed meeting all of you.
I will leave that to the co-chairs. It sounds like we are ready to adjourn.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Didn't you want any comments from people? Or a little bit before 1 o'clock?
We had public comment already, and if there's anybody else that wants to
okay.
speak, if you have something to say, this would be the.
No, I just thought you were going to do a final statement at the end or something.
No, now that we will develop a rhythm and a cadence to meeting, it could very well be that folks are able to watch the meeting and then wish to comment on Zoom. So that's why I'm sitting here and keeping an eye on folks who may wish to join. So the idea is to capture as many folks as possible, knowing lots of people can't make their way to City Hall. So.
Were you indicating that you thought each of us would give a final comment?
Yeah, that's what I wondered, if anybody made a final comment or statement or something.
It's great. We do have time for that.
Well, you brought it up.
Sorry, I missed meeting all of you and getting a little of your background, but, and I'm on my way to Crossroads after you today.
I think backgrounds and expertise and things that you really want, you're bursting at the seams to bring will be some part of the share, and I think we're all looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I know I am.
I mean, I'm not trying to extend the meeting, but maybe now that we're on that idea, we could just do 1 or 2 words of what we think the objective of the group is, maybe, just so we can get it into a articulation. I don't know, though, but I guess we have it covered. No?
I'm not, I think it's too soon, honestly.
All right. That's what I
mean,
needed to
I think we
hear.
need to talk more about it.
Perfect.
Whitney, you bring up a good point. Now that we are an advisory public body, this group will get an email from Jessica, but this group should not have any conversations in that email. Do not reply all, because it could be construed as something that is could trigger right to know. We included, I think everyone has it as attached to your agenda. Now that you're part of a public body, what does that mean? So there are rules around how we meet, and so when you receive something, you may get reminded from time to time, hey, please don't reply all. We'll talk about that in the meeting when the meeting is being duly constituted.
I take my comment back. Retracted.
Well, I'm grateful to be here and connect with you, and I'm sure we have some exciting things to work on. And I've been involved in these things in my life at different times, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I second the motion of Mr. Arvello?
Anyone else?
Sounds good.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you
Thanks,
for-
everybody.
Thank you. I look at leadership.